The fact that I can represent the little girls out there who wanted to do this. I just want to tell all the girls out there that you can do anything you set your mind to.
He has tied the NCAA record with his 8th touchdown.
Here's an onside kick. In your face! Touchdown, Oklahoma State!
Sarah Fuller, the very first woman to compete in the Southeastern Conference and a Power 5 football game.
Brass hits the remix.
Goal is to win. That's all I'm focused on.
And that is the nail in the coffin. Northwestern gets upset.
They got after us. They whipped us.
No coach, no problem.
Felt a little helpless. Still feels good to win.
Lawrence to the end zone, a diving catch.
Draft night, Death Valley, super special night. Wouldn't want to go out any other way.
The committee has spoken for the second time, and let me tell you, there's some changes. It is Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It, Mike Golic Jr., Christine Williamson. I'm Jason Fitz. This is what we do every single Tuesday. We come at you from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern right here to break down everything the committee told us, to figure out what's coming next. We get some fun guests, some good expertise, and along the way, we react with you guys. And let me tell you, the reaction, Christine's our resident, fan of many teams. What, you got Clemson, you got Miami, and you've got the entire Big 12 represented by, which means you, my friend, have had a big night because the committee spoke about your conference.
You were talking about something that you called a conspiracy theory last week, and I told you it's not a conspiracy theory because for some reason I feel like the College Football Playoff Committee wants the Big 12 and the CFP. I don't know why, but the fact that we had teams jump 8 spots and 5 spots this week when they literally didn't do that much is, I think, representative of that.
Well, if there's anything I learned last week, I was seen by Mike Golic Jr., who reminded me my conspiracy theories are just my way of thinly veiling bad hot takes. A lot of my friends agree with that. I feel hurt. Okay, let's take a look here at what the committee has shown you from the top 6. There's no change here. Alabama sits at number 1. Some team, Mike, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, Notre Dame, sits at number 2. At number 3, Christine's Clemson. Like, we could have war in here by the end of the night. At 4, Ohio State, because apparently losses don't matter to the committee. At number 5, Texas A&M, even though they got blown out. At number 6, Florida, who lost to Texas A&M. So, Mike, no change here, right?
No change here. And, Jason, I still can't understand your point because now, especially after this weekend, the gap and really the discomfort grows. Ohio State did not play their game against Illinois this weekend because of what's gone on during this year with COVID-19 and the pandemic. They have now played less than half as many games as Clemson over the course of this. So I would counter with, I get losses are supposed to matter, but what have you seen from Ohio State in a 4-game sample size that's going to vault you over 9 games worth of what does at times look like the best team in college football?
Well, first of all, Clemson has a loss. Ohio State doesn't. So that sticks in my craw. Let's be simple. But the other side of it is, you could make that argument up and down. Why is Ohio State then ahead of Florida? Right now, if you had to pick in a neutral field, you taking Ohio State or Florida in that matchup?
That's an interesting proposition. I would probably still be tempted to take Ohio State in this. But, Christine, I think this becomes the real central thesis of this entire college football season is we have always talked about resume versus what you do on the field. And Ohio State, really the Big Ten, because now we know the oblivion Ohio State faces where if they do not play one of the next 2 games, they're going to fall short of that 6 games needed to be eligible for their own conference's championship game.
The committee is going to have to make a reason for Ohio State to be number 4, especially if they're not going to play in a Big Ten championship, which we don't know if they're going to play exactly 6 games this season. So I feel like they would really have to come up with a reason. Here's the thing. We know that number 1 through 3 are what they are, right? It's really about figuring out who number 4 is based on resume, based on who they play, etc. And if Ohio State doesn't play 6 games this season or doesn't play in a Big Ten championship, how can we really say that Ohio State deserves that number 4 spot?
That's an incredibly interesting point you just made, Christine, because this is like, if we made this into a drinking game, the number of times over the course of the season that Mike and I say, we went through the mock committee process in Dallas would really get you drunk. But
I was going to say, we were up there with as a Medill grad.
So we have gone through that process, though, Mike. And the one thing that really surprised me when I got in the room is you vote in groups of 3. So 1 through 3 was a decision. 4 through 6 becomes the next decision. And it really becomes. That's why I asked the question about Florida State, because about Florida. You see Ohio State here. And the question becomes, all right, if we believe that the limited number of games is a hindrance for Ohio State, is it a hindrance that would make you, Mike, put them below Texas A&M or Florida? Because that's the group of three we're talking about.
But Jason, it's not about right now. I think it's about where we're going in the course of this, because we know what's potentially left. Florida's got a really interesting and clear-cut path because they're probably going to win the East. They're probably going to get to play in the SEC championship game against Alabama. So it's cut and dry for them. The one that's got the most interesting lot in life now is Texas A&M, and that's why I'm so curious to hear about just how that loss is going to be looked at in the context of this season because of that Ohio State team that's sitting there knowing, we might have a team we all think is good, but is 5 games really enough time when everyone else went out, and it's not through their fault. This is the Big Ten's decision-making and got this situation the way it is.
I mean, A&M, realistically, could be sitting home for the SEC championship game saying, hey, we got one loss.
Yeah.
We got that ass whooped on that one loss, but we only got one loss. I mean, that's where it gets, Christine, that's where it gets really confusing for everybody.
I mean, I feel like we've had conversations about like what the committee will do in 2020 because there's so many interesting scenarios. And I've honestly, in my mind, and I don't think this will actually happen, but I've wondered if the committee is likely to let a team with 2 losses in over a team like BYU or Cincinnati because it's 2020. And like, look at how they have the rankings right
That's
now.
why you put Cincy in.
If you have a BYU and Cincinnati team, Iowa State right now is at number 9, right? Like, these teams have 2 losses. And they're still above teams that are undefeated. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, you see 7 through 10 there. In Cincinnati, like, I'm waving the flag this year. Like, I'm gorging myself in Grader's ice cream. We know my Cincinnati love, right? At this point, it's out of control. But at Cincinnati at 7. Georgia, who last week, Tom Luganville said, how is it possible Georgia's the top 10 team? Right after that, Greg McElroy said with this, well, I got no problem with Georgia in the top 10. Like, nobody can agree. And there's Iowa State sitting at 7-2. Iowa State that won because Dicker the kicker didn't make the field goal for Texas. Mike, you did this game. You called this game. The hell are they doing putting Iowa State at number 9?
You know what? I think if you're looking for the Big 12 to be represented in here, Iowa State actually has a pretty compelling case. We know they were a part of that hellish opening weekend where the Big 12 had 3 losses to Sun Belt teams in there. They lost to Louisiana in that one, who at that time was Louisiana. Based on the way they were playing, they oscillate back and forth between that and Lafayette. But I look at that situation and say that's just how Iowa State wins football games. That's what Matt Campbell has developed there with that program as a team that's going to have to keep you close. They're going to work. I mean, outside of Notre Dame, that might be the most tight end heavy team in the country. More 2 and 3 tight end sets on the field. Charlie Kohler there, a preseason All-American. It's an unbelievable team. Breece Hall, the nation's leading rusher. Like, it's got all the pieces. It just has that one eyesore of a loss in the beginning of the season and then another one there. But if you're looking at that conference, they're in the driver's seat. They've got a 99% chance to play in the Big 12 title game. I understand why they're the top Big 12 team, but we know outside of really the top 5 or 6, it's a little more of a grab bag than we probably give it credit for.
Well, and they have the best quarterback nickname in all the land. Oh, so Purdy. I mean, come on. The number of times I say, oh, so Purdy every time I read a highlight. But to that point, you make a fine point that of the Big 12 teams, they absolutely are the most deserving to be there. The conference doesn't matter. I mean, the playoff committee is telling you right now that they've gone up 4 spots. Now, I realize some teams lost. They went up 4 spots when they barely beat a Texas team that is not back. So, like, that's hard for me to negotiate.
And so, again, I look at this and I say, and at this point, who else are you going to put there? Because if you look below them, Miami, Oklahoma, and BYU were all idle in this last week. You had the difficulty going there, and if we keep going on down here, Oklahoma at 11.
My quick answer. Like, I realize that Penix Jr. is gone for the season, but that hasn't affected them on the field yet. At least give them the opportunity to do something on the field. Plus, BYU's over here saying, hold my beer.
Listen, every bit that you are, Jason, for Cincinnati, I am for BYU. And Christine, that's the one that, to me, continues to be the biggest middle finger given during the course of this, is to BYU. The committee has made it abundantly clear at this point there is very little short of going out and saying we want Bama in real time that they're going to do to get involved in this.
I think the thing that's interesting, and I was just looking at the rankings again, right? When you think about group of 5 teams, you mentioned Louisiana now in the top 25. Obviously, Iowa State beat or lost to Louisiana, which gives them a little bit of an edge. But when you think about BYU, it's like, do they beat Cincinnati in the eye test, right? Like, when we're talking about resume and stuff like that, yes. But or Cincinnati obviously is about, but like, does BYU beat Cincinnati in the eye test? And obviously they've blown through their entire schedule, right?
But the problem here, to your point, and it's a great one, which one's better by the eye test? I would take Cincinnati. The problem is BYU is rated so low at this point
Yeah.
that there's not even an advantage for Cincinnati adding them as an opponent. Like, what Cincinnati get out of a Cincinnati-BYU game?
And we talk about the timing of certain things being a bit unfortunate and all this is what the BYU potentially had with the Pac-12. And we know if they had gone out and scheduled Washington or someone, they could have pulled out within 24, 48 hours there in favor of a Pac-12 team. We know the difficulty that they were facing in this situation. But, man, you wonder just how much the visual of them going out, saying, hey, we want to play and getting turned down would have meant to this committee. Because clearly they're looking at them and just saying it's no contest at this point, despite, like, I think if you want an eye test team, it's BYU. The biggest difference to me and the biggest drop-off, Jason, from the Power 5 to the Group of 5 is always on the lines of scrimmage. That's where BYU is built. That's where if you line them up, to me, especially in the offensive side, O-line to O-line, BYU is edging out for me in that category when it comes to that group up front. And so you combine that with Zach Wilson, who's getting all of the draft praise, the dark horse Heisman praise. Like, you can't have more of a banner for all the publicity you need to pull this off, and yet it hasn't mattered not a bit to the committee.
Well, and I don't know what changes that mindset. That's what we'll have to try and figure out, over the course of the next few weeks. The other thing that came from those rankings, and, it was as much as we keep talking about BYU and where they're sort of stuck. When you look back, and I'll throw our guys for a loop here, if we can pull back up 10 through 15 or 11 through 15 that we had up a second ago, when you see BYU is where they are, there's also a surprise at 15. I mean, when we talk about what the committee is valuing, Oklahoma State,
all confused.
Oklahoma State goes up 8 spots with a win over Texas Tech. That, yes, they had the game in hand, and that is one of the metrics, by the way, when we were in Dallas Drink. One of the things that they talked about was, game control is a huge metric. They were in control of that game for the large majority of it, but Texas Tech made it a game at the end, and Oklahoma State sort of eked out the win. That gets you 8 extra slots on the it just feels like to that end that they're trying to balance the scales to give more credit to the Big 12.
I mean, I read Heather Dinich had a whole entire article, right, about all the possible scenarios, and there was a scenario where a Big 12 team could be in the CFP. So maybe this is the Big 12 or the CFP committee saying, hey, if we put Iowa State up 5, if we put Oklahoma State up all the way 8 spots for beating a Texas team that, like you said, is not back, then maybe it kind of gives them the leverage to put, because what we talked about, who knows what the heck's going to happen with Ohio State? What if A&M loses to Auburn this weekend? Like, there's so many things that could happen. So they're trying to, it honestly feels like they're trying to nudge in another Power 5 school rather than letting a Group of 5 team into the college football playoff.
To me, this reeks more of, and I think it makes it really interesting for everyone's decision-making down the stretch here, because we know there are going to be some teams that have the opportunity, whether it's in the Big Ten, where we know they had it already planned out, where teams were going to match up with their division counterpart ranking-wise on the Big Ten championship weekend. Supposedly, we'll see if COVID-19 allows this, but how aggressive teams are in scheduling with some of the open dates coming up towards the end of the season, because to me, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams that did not play this weekend. 9 teams that were idle. And so to me, those massive jumps, because North Carolina lost to Notre Dame by 2 touchdowns and was shut out in the second half, moved up 2 spots in the rankings this week. It puts a premium on, did you play recently? Did we watch you this week go out and do something? Because being idle seems to be rarely rewarded in this.
But the hard part about that entire logic, and I get what you're saying, Mike, and I understand you have to play enough games. The hard part of the logic is at some point the body of work that you do have matters. So if I'm USC, for example, and I know a lot of people aren't worried about USC falling 2 slots to number 20, but if you're USC, what'd you do that changed the mindset? Like, what did the committee see this week that causes them to drop or causes somebody else to move above them?
They didn't see. That's the whole point. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying if I'm looking and reading this way, as we see 16 through 20 here, North Carolina up 2 spots. The Chants up 2 spots. Coastal, rank them, thank God. Iowa up 2 spots.
Iowa up 5 spots. Up
5, excuse me. Yeah.
Like, just love
3 words, Hawkeye pride. But Jason, I think it ends up being the premium of playing in this one. SC already came into an instance like the Big Ten, where they were going to come into this late. They were going to have more on their plate to try and accomplish in less time with less room for error, and somehow just surviving to advance seems like a thing that's getting rewarded.
And certainly we don't, we try not to live too much in the hot take space in general on this show as we react to everything. But when you got an Iowa team with 2 losses that moves up 5 spots, and a USC team that whether they played or didn't play is still undefeated, whether they should be, I mean, yes, the first
undefeated.
games,
I could say undefeated in 2 games where they had a very real opportunity to lose both. And I get it. You go out there and you find a way to win, but that's why we have metrics like game control. That's why all of those things are, you want to reference, again, you are now blind drunk as we were in Dallas for the mock committee thing, where they put up on the board the resumes of both teams and the relative metrics that they're using to measure them. And game control is always one of them. How, by win probability, how likely was the outcome for the majority of the game? And for a team like SC, that thing has been a heart attack going all over the board during theirs.
But it's also hard to, if that's the argument that we make, then what is the explanation for North Carolina? Like, if you look at that North Carolina, like, I had high expectations that I was going to be able to trash talk you this week, and that did not happen.
No.
Listen, it's clearly out of respect for Notre Dame, who,
God.
by the way, we have buried the lead. Clinched their spot in the ACC title game.
Goodness.
Some schedule manipulation had to happen around the end of the ACC season here. Notre Dame's game against Wake Forest, one of the games that's lost, was supposed to be the Duke's Mayo Classic, December 12th. And so now Notre Dame and Clemson are both going to have an open week leading into the title game. The ACC wanted to judge Miami, Notre Dame, and Clemson based off a 9-game body of work. And so they decided to go about the scheduling this way. So please put some respect on that fact. Notre Dame went out in dominant fashion without 2 of their starting offensive linemen. They lost Kyle Hamilton, their all-world safety, to a targeting foul in the first half. And all they did was adjust in the second half and hold one of the most explosive offenses of college football scoreless. To me, this might just be saying, hey, North Carolina, not only did you play, but you were tied at halftime with what we perceive as Kirk Herbstreit said, maybe the 1B team in college football.
I will say, and Mike, we've worked together enough at this point that you're sort of my work wife. I will say something that I usually only say to my wife. I was wrong. Okay, I will admit I was wrong, and I text this to Mike, and I'll be totally transparent. I absolutely have been looking for a fatal flaw in Notre Dame, and I think what hit me this week, because I went out and I said to Mike and I said to everybody else that would listen, Jordan Cornette, all of my buddies around here that are Notre Dame guys, I kept saying, look, this thing's going to fall apart. North Carolina is going to at least give them a fight. We're going to see this. I was wrong. I was wrong about the team speed on defense. I was wrong about their ability to get more weapons on offensive ball. I was wrong about the ability for Ian Book to play at the highest level that he's playing at. Mike, it pains me to say it, but you're right. Notre Dame is clearly at the same level as, I will say, Alabama this year. I think they both create matchup nightmares, and I have been wrong about expecting Notre Dame to fall apart.
Christine,
I've just
this
been
is nice,
salty.
isn't it?
I've honestly, I haven't told you this, Gojo, but I've been very salty that Notre Dame is even in the ACC, because I feel like if Notre Dame was not in the ACC this season, Miami would have a chance, but now they don't.
But Clemson has a chance, so you're good.
Clemson has more than a chance, okay? But I feel like if the ACC looked like it typically does with divisions, it would be a whole different story. But obviously Notre Dame is completely dominating, so there's no question that you guys deserve it. I just am a little salty.
See, Christine is a little like when you're playing spades with somebody and they have a lot of cards left and you think that means you've gotten an advantage. But what you don't realize is all of her cards lay out. She's got a little Miami, she's got a little Clemson, she's got the entire Big 12. She's going to be able to take everything she wants off the board at the end.
So that's how you play spades?
Well,
I don't know how to play
I was going to say, I don't know either.
No, that is not how you play
spades. Does that mean that I'm winning? What does that mean?
Sometimes
new high score. Is that bad? Did I break the game?
Sometimes when you're playing spades, you get a little overconfident because you see the person across from you and you think they got a lot of cards.
I think you're just drunk then.
No. I used to play a lot of spades, Mike. All right, it's Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It. Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State. That's your top 4. Texas A&M in at number 5. Florida in at number 6. That's a lot of what we've been reacting to. Obviously, a lot of the conversation around the rest of the top 25 is really about trying to see what the committee thinks of different possible scenarios, strength of schedules. But, guys, we haven't talked too much about it. Ohio State is going to be one of the more interesting case studies that we're going to have to figure out, because right now, if they play their last 2 games, they will play enough games to qualify for the Big Ten championship. If they don't, they will need 12 of the 14 remaining games across the Big Ten to be canceled to have any shot at it. So there is a mathematical possibility, but there's also the possibility that I've jokingly referenced that, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh could just wake up one day and decide that they don't want to play in a couple weeks. So, that's going to be one of the tricks. Now, we've heard from the Big Ten. but we don't necessarily know what the College Football Playoff Committee thinks of that. So rather than speculate to the committee's process, we are going to get some expertise right now in Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It. We're joined by Gary Barta. He's the new CFP Selection Committee chair member. Gary, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. We're trying to make sense of all of this. So we're going to pepper you with a lot of questions. I know you answer these all the time, but we appreciate your willingness to sit down with us. So talk to me a little bit about Iowa State. We've reacted a lot to them today. They make a big jump compared to the result that we saw. What did the committee see from Iowa State specifically?
Well, as we always do, it's a body of work. I mean, they did beat Texas this week in a heck of a football game, but even going back beyond that, they beat Oklahoma previously, and you just take a look at, well, they're in first place in the Big 12 Conference. So a combination of all of that. They have Brock Purdy, who is a terrific leader. He's just a gamer. He's a very, very good quarterback. And Breece Hall, who many would suggest is one of the better running backs in the country. And so that's just all those things pulled together. Iowa State deserved to go where they ended up, in our opinion.
Sorry about that, Gary. I actually agree with you on that. I think relative to what's happened, Iowa State is getting some due credit in this process. But I want to look up near the top. Ohio State still sitting at 4 right now, but we're idle again this weekend. How concerned is the committee about Ohio State's ability to complete a schedule? They've got a minimum number of games to meet for the Big Ten championship game. If they're below that threshold, will that affect the way you guys judge that team?
Well, there's no doubt that in 2020, because of the pandemic, we're trying to evaluate teams, some who have played 3 or 4 games, and try to compare them to teams who have played 8, 9, 10 games, and that's a problem. It's a challenge for sure. But we just sit down right now. When you look at Ohio State, we take the information we have, the games that they've played. They didn't play this past week, so we didn't have another game to evaluate. We look at their explosiveness on offense. They did beat the number 12 team in Indiana. So that body of work is there. Now, I need to jump ahead to your question specifically. It is something that we talked about this week. We talked about it last week. And there's no doubt that it's going to become a part of the evaluation. It was a part of the evaluation. That's the number of games played. And it'll be unique to 2020, but we are going to have to consider it. I don't know if you were alluding to the fact they don't play in the championship game in any conference is one of the criteria that we evaluate. So if there's no championship game, we'll just have to evaluate without that championship.
Gary, you mentioned that you guys are having to evaluate things differently because it is 2020. When you think about the CFP in general, usually a team with 2 losses doesn't get in. We haven't seen a group of 5 team get in. So how likely is it that those things could possibly happen considering the fact that it's 2020 and things are just kind of up in the air at this moment?
Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on what could happen. All I know is there's a lot of unique things that we've had to evaluate. And, there's games. I think last week there was 15 or 16 games canceled. In the top 25, our top 25, 6 of the teams that we ranked in the top 25 didn't get a chance to play because of COVID. So I'm just glad we got through week 1. We got through week 2. And we'll take a look at the games that are played this week, and we'll evaluate them and see where they fall out. And beyond that, it's day to day, just seeing who we're going to be evaluating and which games we're going to be able to take a look at.
So, Gary, last year when we were doing this show, Mike and I wrote out our 10 commandments that we'd learned over the process of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. One was thou shalt not get blown out, because so far historically when that happens, you're done. Now, what we see is Texas A&M sitting at number 5, but they have a decisive loss. So how does this committee treat a team that had a loss by a sizable margin?
Well, specifically, their only loss is to Alabama, the number 1 team in the country. The score was what it was, and we evaluated that in our discussions. In the room, we had a discussion about where Texas A&M deserved to sit. On the other hand, they beat the number 6 team in the country in Florida. So the discussion was, where is Ohio State, where is Texas A&M, and where is Florida? And those 3, Texas A&M did beat head-to-head Florida. And the committee decided that there was enough information to put Ohio State ahead of Texas A&M. And all of that was considered, including the loss to Alabama.
Gary, is there anything that BYU can do at this point to increase their standing relative to where they are now, a second straight week outside of the top 10 despite their undefeated record? Is it going to take scheduling a different opponent for the strength of schedule to get to a place that the committee feels comfortable with?
Well, they didn't play this week, to your point. So we had evaluated their schedule leading up to this point. The fact is they're 9-0, and they're a heck of a football team. Zach Wilson is one of the best players, quarterbacks in the country. But when the committee looks at their schedule and look at who they play, compare it to some of the other teams and their schedules, they ended up at 13. They did move up one spot, even though they didn't play this past week. And the only thing that can change that are the people around them, or if they get a chance to play more games that the committee has a chance to evaluate.
Obviously, losses are something that we always try and figure out how the committee evaluates. And, I know in the past the committee's been told to consider who wasn't available. So for Clemson specifically to be sitting at number 3, how do you guys judge the players that weren't available as factoring into that loss?
It's definitely always, every year, there's the available, unavailable player list that the committee gets a chance to look at and see if it had an impact on the game. In 2020, another one of those factors where the COVID list, we see who's available, who's not available. That includes the players who weren't available in COVID. Sometimes we don't know the names. In Clemson's case, it was obviously very public that when the quarterback's not there, it's pretty apparent that he's not available. And so that was taken into consideration in their loss to Notre Dame. Notre Dame played a heck of a football game. Clemson, but they didn't have their starting quarterback, and they didn't have 3 key defensive players. So it was discussed, it was considered when the rankings were put together.
Gary, it's been a long day. We appreciate you hanging out. I'm proud that Mike didn't use the whole time to try and convince you that Notre Dame's actually number 1. We appreciate you hanging out with us, my friend.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
By the way, and I will say, in fairness, it is a very difficult job what they try and do to try and figure out which of these teams belong. It gets heated. They've done a great job, and I appreciated his transparency in the process.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, and you heard it say there, he mentioned that team was idle. We didn't have a chance to evaluate them this week. So as we talked a lot about what went on there, I think that notion that, all right, we've got to see only what we can see has become vital to that room.
Yeah, if I'm Ohio State, I'm a little puckered up from what I just heard there. It makes me a little bit nervous. All right. What doesn't make me nervous is some week in review, Crunch Time edition. Let's get to Crunch Time, brought to you by Cheez-It. And it starts with anything you can do, I can do better. Don't try the flea flicker against Clemson. Whatever you do, it's not going to work out for you. Pitt didn't learn this rule. They tried it, and then Clemson said, nope, this is how we get it done. Oh, absolutely beautiful play in what was a very easy game for them to get done. I mean, I love the flea flicker, Mike, but it's just right after Pitt tried to do it to them.
Yeah, Clemson, like we've seen this going back to the Georgia Tech game too. They've got some salt to their game this year. Like they're not above not only style points, but going out there and trying to embarrass you. We know Dabo's been plenty ticked off lately.
T-Law is back. That's all you need to know. And then also the fact that they did this right after Pickett just threw his 3rd pick of the quarter is actually so incredibly embarrassing.
Speaking of incredible, Ian Book flips a bat. This is one of those moments when you're playing like pickup football with somebody and you see them do something, you say, oh my God, no, and then it works. You're like, oh yeah, I trusted you the whole way. Mike, admit it, you were puckered up.
Oh, this is a no, still no. Don't ever do this again, but wow, it was cool. This is how you get LeBron James to tweet about the team and tune into the game by doing wild, reckless stuff. This is why they're calling him John Football, not Johnny Football.
I like that. All right, next up. Oh! You got to say it, but I like the slap.
Okay.
The slap is like,
I honestly,
I
feel like he was slapping him to tell him to get off him. Yeah. Get off me, bro.
I mean, a little bit, but also, like, you got to have some self-awareness. Like, he flaps down like I would right there. Like, he is tight to the ground.
I know the font says it. He is okay. He looked very not okay there for a second.
He looked like he wasn't a human being.
Oh, no, he went sleepy for
I was like, are you okay? Is that a mask or a mannequin?
A mannequin?
Some of us have particularly tight hamstrings, okay? I feel seen right now by this. I'm just
I thought you were going to say some of us also have a room full of mannequins in our house, and we'll be able to judge how they fall, you maniac.
All right, next up on the list, safety first. With all due respect to Dan Orlovsky, this might be the worst safety ever.
Oh, it's so bad.
I mean, he knows he's going down, but he's like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then there's just this split second right there.
Yeet.
But just when you think, and this is bad, trust me, this is bad. But just when you think it couldn't get any worse in this game, it actually did. And this is our number one moment.
Oh, God.
It starts on third down. Now, this is important. The last seconds, clock's winding down. Third down. Quarterback's going around.
Oh, good hit.
Run around. Up. Oh, no, he gets sacked. Okay, no worries. You got to have that play in the back of your mind. You're out of timeouts. Well, what they seem to forget is this is now fourth down. This is fourth down, only seconds remaining to end the game. He clocks it.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
He stops the clock. Look at the sideline celebrating up there, too. They're like, that's that moment that he's not going to do this, is he?
I was going to say, the defense has got to be like, nobody tell him. Nobody tell him.
Let him do it.
Nobody move. I mean, you can. There's never a chance where this happens. Like, you would think that somebody, but 1 second left, he tried to.
I appreciate him, like, looking up to it. That's one of those moments, like, you just have it there in your head. There's so much you're trying to juggle, like.
Just so you guys know, that kid went to my high school.
Really?
Yes, his name is Rex Culpepper. He's the son of Brad Culpepper.
Yeah.
And he went to Plant High School in Tampa, Florida.
Well, speaking of Syracuse.
I'm glad you're still proudly repping that high school even after we watched that.
Speaking of Syracuse, Syracuse actually plays one Notre Dame this weekend. So, Christine, I know we've got a little chain reaction schedule to look at here.
Yeah, let's look at the schedule. I think the most important, when you look at this schedule, I think one of the most important games this weekend is Texas A&M at Auburn, because I feel like that game really has some implications when it comes to the top four. We looked at some of, if you read some of like what Heather Dinich has lined out and like what are some of the scenarios that can happen with the CFP shakeups. I think the number one matchup that can really shake up the CFP is A&M at Auburn, and so that's really exciting. Miami now is playing at Duke this weekend due to COVID, and Indiana at Wisconsin. Those are two other games that are super, super important. So I believe we have Heather Dinich with us now so that we can kind of talk through all of these things. And we bring her here all the time so that she can walk us through this and kind of make sense of everything that we're seeing. And Heather, as we looked at the CFP rankings at 7 p.m. today, we were very shook by the fact that the Big 12, for some reason, has completely overtaken the CFP, jumped by 5 and 8 positions. So when you look at the CFP rankings this week, what stands out to you?
Well, it was status quo, the top 7, but I thought it was interesting to hear CFP Committee Chair Gary Barta say that there was a significant discussion about whether or not Texas A&M should jump Ohio State for that 4th spot. And I'm sitting there thinking, Ohio State's already an X factor. And for them to be thinking about dropping them out of that top 4 spot now, and they didn't even miss a Michigan State or Michigan game, I thought that was pretty telling. There's not a given there for that 4th spot. It's not a lock.
Well, and Heather, I mean, we talked to Gary earlier, and I mentioned it then, but we've always joked that you can't get blown out and make the college football playoff. But there's Texas A&M with the blowout loss. So, how is the committee treating blowouts now?
So, it's interesting. If you look at Georgia, too, the committee likes their losses. There's such a thing as a good loss, right? Look, I'm surprised that Texas A&M is even the 5th best team. I mean, I'm not surprised that this is how it shook out tonight. I'm saying I personally have questions about whether or not the Aggies are good enough to be number 5, because if you watch that LSU game closely, they should have won by 50 points. LSU can't protect their quarterback, they can't catch the ball, and then you have Texas A&M. They should have, if it wasn't for the pick 6, we're not even talking about what they did offensively. So I think that when you look at the selection committee and blowout wins and blowout losses, more than anything, what's going to matter is how many games did you play. And I think at the end of the day, that could hurt Ohio State.
I think that's interesting, Heather, and looking forward now, you have a great article up on .com kind of outlining what the path looks like as we go ahead. So I'm curious, as you look at this upcoming weekend and you look at some of the X-Factor teams involved, who's got the most at stake, not only for their own future, but for what could happen to the other teams that are hopefuls around that 4, 5, 6 area?
Well, I do think that Texas A&M at Auburn is important, but when you're looking at Cincinnati, they have a path into this thing. And when we talk about conference championship games and we talk about the possibility that Ohio State might not play for the Big Ten title, that's all important because Cincinnati can. And if they run the table and they finish as undefeated American Athletic Conference champions, we're looking at a 10-game resume compared to whatever Ohio State might play. And if you add that to Texas A&M losing at Auburn, and then if Alabama beats Florida and knocks them out of the way, and if Notre Dame were to beat Clemson and knock them out of the way, Cincinnati can make a very good case to sneak in that top 4.
Heather, we've mentioned the article that you wrote on .com about all of the different scenarios that could happen. One of the scenarios does include BYU kind of breaking into that top 4. Now what we know after this second ranking, do you feel like that is more likely for a BYU team to make it into the top 4?
BYU needs a miracle. Let's be very, very clear about this, right? When they were ranked, what was it, 15 last week? What? Because they moved up to 13. No, they're 14. They moved up to 13, right? Everybody lost their minds. But the committee didn't care. They didn't listen to any of it. They moved them up one spot. They're still not even in New Year's Six contention. But if you have all kinds of chaos, then maybe it can happen. But I just think that it's such a long shot. But the funny thing is when I put that scenario into our playoff predictor and the machine we don't usually agree with each other, it actually gave BYU a fighting chance.
All right, so as we've looked through all of this, is there one team left that is there one ranking that has surprised you so far, Heather?
Georgia. Georgia is the one 2 weeks in a row that just continues to blow me away because I don't think they passed the eye test. I don't think they passed the resume test. And if you're going to hold BYU's strength of schedule against them, why isn't it applied consistently against Georgia? Because their opponents have the teams that they have beaten have been dreadful. It's a losing record. So that one is one that continues to baffle me as a top 10 team. All
right, Heather, as always, we like to throw you little curveballs. Everybody's getting one tonight. We're playing a game. It's a Mad Lib game, okay? You don't get to be in on the whole secret here. We're going to ask you very specific questions. We need your honest answers. Are you ready for this?
Never ready. Let's see what happens.
All right. So first, like your guilty pleasure TV network. It can't be ESPN. Like your guilty pleasure TV network.
It's totally Lifetime. Forget the Hallmark movies, whatever that is. Just the Lifetime movie network. I need that.
God, you don't know how happy I am that you said that. All right. Next, we need like any celebrity crush from your life. Any celebrity you've ever had a crush on.
Bruce Willis.
Yes.
That's a good one. That's a solid one.
We'll let you know how it put time. Yeah. Old Bruce Willis or young Bruce Willis is what we're being asked. Old or young?
Die Hard movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in on this. All right. Heather, we appreciate your time. We will be sure you know how this Mad Lib played out, but you have been every bit the delightful teammate we knew you would be. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
How red is my face? Goodbye.
Bruce Willis is the best possible answer.
That is a really solid answer.
I was never in a million years expecting Bruce Willis.
Really?
If you don't know, you'll know later. We'll tell you what's going on with the Mad Libs. It's going to be a continual theme throughout the course of the show. And believe me, you'll want to stick around to see how it plays out. In the meantime, it's rankings reactions, which, Christine, means we need to rank.
Let's rank some reactions. All right, number 5. This is how the Fighting Aggies band is reacting to COVID. Now, here's the thing. There's holes in their masks, and they're also blowing their, air into the air. They're blowing their air into the air. So I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of wearing a mask.
Yeah, like, it seems like a bold strategy. I understand you're there, you're going to play your instruments. Maybe that the mask just comes down so it's not always exposed. Like, I saw these for straws earlier in COVID, and it seemed just as nonsensical then as it does now.
There are 2 important things to note here. One, when you grow up a little kid, fat kid, as we've talked about, that played the violin, the one thing that's interesting is you get like a little hickey here, and it looks like a hickey. It just wears in.
Oh, yeah.
So you end up with this massive hickey on your neck all the time, which is great. So, like, that's far more embarrassing than the mask.
Because you could tell people people you actually got a hickey.
No, because then everybody makes fun of you for having a hickey at school, even though you're like 8 years old. It gets lost on the logic. Number two, I always wanted to learn. I always want to learn how to play the saxophone just so I could play Careless Whisper. Like, can we all agree that if I could just walk in and play Careless Whisper, it would make me the coolest person you've ever met?
I mean, maybe not the coolest person I've ever met. It would make you kind of cool.
You'd be a hell of a lot cooler if you did, though.
Wow.
Okay, we talked about this game multiple times. At number 4, Iowa State versus Texas. This is the reaction to Texas missing a field goal.
Snap clean.
Oh, no.
Kick on the way. No good.
So this is obviously at Texas. They missed the field goal, but they still let off the cannons. And I mean, I feel like they just didn't know what was going on.
I tell you what, first off, I don't know the crew that was on this game, but they did a phenomenal job. I was listening to it. Incredible.
Wow, I wonder who it was. Who exactly was it?
On
who
that
exactly
one. Matt Berry,
that?
Chris Budden were fantastic over the course of that game. But you saw that was a 57-yard field goal by Dicker there. He had a 57-yard long for his career. That thing was good from 60, just went left. So good, it appeared to look that, yeah, firing that cannon there, that was a little bit of insult to injury. Losing on senior day is tough, man. We did it twice when I was at Notre Dame, and I feel terrible for those dudes at Texas.
Look, let's just be real. When your job is to fire the cannons, you make sure at the end of the game, like that's the moment you just hold off 1 second. You're like, we good? We were
talking about that in the booth. Like me and Matt, we didn't want to react too quickly because you don't want to go and call it early on something that close.
I mean, at least there's no fans there, so it's not like they're all like, woo!
There were 25% of that stadium.
Well, there's not that many fans, so it's not like everybody's cheering also, and then it's like even more insult to injury, because he did miss it, and that's embarrassing.
Tough one.
All right, number 3. Florida's Dan Mullen was blowing up defensive coordinator Todd Grantham.
Happen to say that, or the TVs catch it? Is that how you guys interact a lot of the time, or is it more today than usual?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I got home for Thanksgiving dinner, and we're neighbors, and he had his Christmas light up in the front yard. I said we don't put Christmas lights up until after Thanksgiving, and he adamantly said, yes, we do. I put my Christmas lights up on Thanksgiving. I said, no, you don't. And so, we agreed to disagree.
Okay, so Dan Mullen was blowing up Todd Grantham, and that was his response. It was all about the Christmas lights.
Look, what it should be about is the two most interesting things on the clip is that Grantham thinks that the masked diaper is okay, and it is not. And number 2 is the way that it looked on Mullen's face. It actually made it look like the gator on the side was like talking a little bit. I was kind of in for that. Like the way his jaw was moving made it look like the gator was like.
Alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth, but no toothbrush. That all makes sense now. Man, those alligators were ornery on that one. I tell you what, ornery.
What in the world? I don't know what that is.
The water boy?
Oh, see, that was such a long time ago that I watched that. I was literally a child.
Wow, like that was so long ago. Now you know how I feel, like you young whippersnappers.
You remember when Bobby Boucher showed up at halftime and the Mud Dogs won the Bourbon Bowl now, do you?
Okay, at number 2, we have something that we're calling the finish, because guess what? Buffalo's Jaret Patterson, he had 8 rushing touchdowns, and it tied the number for the most all-time in one game. He also had 409 yards, which is 18 yards shy of the all-time record. And guess what? Then he got pulled out of the game. His head coach, Lance Leipold, said he had no idea that was even going on, which is why he ended up pulling him.
Yeah, this is a tough one, and got a chance to cover Buffalo earlier this season. What a program. Lance Leipold's going to be a very coveted Group of 5 coaching name. But Jaret Patterson is a full-blown stud. When we played Miami, actually, my senior year at Notre Dame, we were really close to breaking the single-game Notre Dame rushing record, and we were going back after the game trying to find any spot where we could get yardage back. Like, somebody in that process, whether it's the SID or anyone, has to get that information going on down the sideline, so that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for someone playing football at any level, let alone someone playing Group of 5 football that has a chance to cement a legacy like that.
Coach Leipold is somebody I know well, and I don't know many people that care more about the kids that have played for him. I cannot believe that he would have ever allowed that to happen had he known. And I also can say, from what I know of him, I can see him getting lost in the moment and having no idea. So this is one of those moments that just flat out stinks. But I don't want it to overshadow what was a incredible, historic effort. And Buffalo, by the way, is just killing everybody in that.
If you haven't watched Jaret Patterson yet this year and that was your introduction, keep watching. It's like that every game, even if the numbers don't match up. Guy's insane.
Nobody expected that kid to have 8 rushing touchdowns. There's no way in the world that Coach Leipold would be like, oh, how many does he need? Okay, 8. He's getting it this game. You know what I'm saying?
And he was less than 20 yards away from the record. But there's no way somebody's over there like, oh, he's 409 right now. Like, somebody's got to tell Coach that.
Yeah, exactly. That's on the entire group.
All right, so we had a woman infiltrate college football in the Power 5 last week. Sarah Fuller, shout out. How about this reaction to her playing in Vanderbilt's game?
I just think it's incredible that I am able to do this. All I want to do is be a good influence to the young girls out there.
Sarah Fuller, happy Thanksgiving. What a day in college football.
I've had girl dads come up to me and they're like, you are inspiring my little girls and I want them to know that they can do anything and prove that point. And I think that has been the coolest thing.
The coolest thing, because so many young girls were watching that game. There were plenty of tweets that were being tweeted about people's daughters watching that game, and being able to see a female, a woman who is playing in a college football game was one of the most amazing things for me. I have often sometimes said that I played for the Denver Broncos, which I didn't. I worked there. But having a woman that actually played in a Power 5 game is absolutely amazing. And we actually have a reaction from one of our coworkers' daughters, Anish Shroff. Ashoff. Am I saying his right name?
Shroff.
Shroff, okay.
Wow.
Why are you so excited?
Because a girls playing football, I told you.
Like, if that doesn't, just move you to tears over the weekend, Anish's daughter, who Anish does a great job as a play-by-play announcer for us here at ESPN. His daughter became internet famous for being able to pronounce DJ Uiagalelei better than half the professionals who are paid to do so. But that moment right there, to know you can, oftentimes you have to see it done. And I always say, I was fortunate to have someone who is my literal flesh and blood, my same name, do all the things I ever wanted to do in a situation. I can't imagine how empowering that is for a young girl who's never seen anyone do something like this.
And believe me, Vandy's a program I know well. And Derek Mason obviously was let go this week. He didn't get a lot of wins there. This is his lasting legacy. He has been part of a program that has changed college football forever for the better. And I hope that everybody remembers at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what gender you are, doesn't matter your sexuality, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you can help a favorite team win, go out there and do it. Vandy proved that they were willing to put that on the line. Really proud of them.
And I think the thing that's groundbreaking is because a lot of sports obviously you have male and female. We do not have female football, right? So the fact that we have a woman that's able to play on a football team because she's a freaking baller, she's an SEC champion, right? She's built for the part, right? So I think being able to see, as we're seeing here, this little girl watch her play is one of the most amazing things.
And what she did on short notice, this wasn't something that had been in the works all year. This was, we don't have a kicker. We need somebody to step up. And so she came in on a week's notice, went out here, had to execute the squib kick in that situation. I mean, I'd assume she's never worn pads before this a week in her life. So you factor all of that in, and stepping up in that way, in addition to being groundbreaking in all the ways that we've done, nothing but respect for being able to come in the spot the way she did.
Vanderbilt's quarterback said after the game that she was the one that stood up at halftime and said, where's our energy? Where's our power? Where's our passion? She was the one on the sideline in the second half that was cheering people on because she comes from a championship culture at that school. I think that shows her leadership. And by the way, she's the only kicker on the roster again this weekend. So if you don't like it, get used to it. This is a new part of college football, and I could not be prouder of Vanderbilt for taking this.
If you don't like it, that's a you thing, and you're a dork.
Amen.
She's a whole athlete.
Yeah. So we'll keep getting reaction on all things college football. It's the Rankings Reaction Show presented by Cheez-It. Mike Golic Jr., Christine Williamson. I'm Jason Fitz. And we like to bring in an extra Wolfpack member here. We grow by
side
one.
Of beef, baby.
Eric Mac Lain joining us. Woo! Oh, and look at this is
wow.
Is that the Peloton?
I was going to say the casual Peloton in the background showing that he's fit.
And a Peloton back there.
Wow.
Look at this guy.
You're just like an overachiever. I don't even understand it.
You know what, Mac Lain? I will send you all the cheese that you want. You just go ahead and send me a Peloton. Deal?
I don't know if that works like that.
Deal. That's a fair trade.
It's not a fair trade at all.
Okay, so, obviously you work for the ACC network and do tremendous work for the ACC network. in your mind, as an ACC Network analyst, is Clemson clearly better than Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, you look at we wouldn't even be having this conversation if Trevor Lawrence was healthy, if 4 defensive starters were healthy, and maybe a game that they played in South Bend and Notre Dame is a little bit different. So I think that's the biggest thing with the committee is they're taking that in such a consideration and such a factor of the outcome and where Clemson is. That's why they put them there. Now, the way things are lining up, and I really don't even want to say it until it comes to fruition, Notre Dame, of course, being in, but the 19th is looking like one of the best rematches, one of the most anticipated football games this year that we've had in quite some time. And it should be nothing short of fireworks.
Yeah, Eric, I was going to ask you about that because we saw news today with the ACC, a lot of reshuffling with the schedule. And so Notre Dame now locked into its spot in the ACC championship game against, we assume, Clemson there, and going to have that December 12th date leading up to that game open the same way Clemson is. Do you agree with the way the ACC decided to do things down the stretch of the season, the decisions they made based on the virus here?
You know, I think it certainly is fair. I would love to have known how that situation come about. Did Notre Dame call the ACC? Did the ACC call Notre Dame and propose it? However it happened, I think it's fair, you know, to have the best team in your conference at this time, the number 2 team in the country, not be put at a disadvantage the same way that Clemson is, if they would have to play. And so I think that it's fair, Mike, and congratulations on your first ever conference championship appearance. You guys have been playing football a long time. I'm surprised it's taken this long, but here you are.
So I'm going to give you a chance to possibly either make Mike very upset or make him very happy. Let's just say Clemson beats Notre Dame pretty handedly in that ACC championship. Do you think that both Notre Dame and Clemson should be in the CFP?
Look, it's going to be really interesting. You know, I think that Notre Dame, similar to what Kirk Herbstreit has said a bunch, I think that they are number 1B. I think Alabama and Notre Dame are neck and neck, and those guys look really, really good. A solid football team. And really, it's almost refreshing because of how different this Notre Dame team is. They are very vintage. They are very old school in the way that they have a great offensive line, the best in the country. That just plows over people with a fantastic running game, a quarterback that has evolved from a game manager to an absolute baller. Ian Book and his escapability has made Notre Dame so much more dynamic and better on offense. And then you throw in an elite defense that all they do is shut people down and shut down the run, no matter who they're going against. So when you ask the question if they get stumped in the ACC championship, I think there's some other things that have to happen for them to still get in. But if it's a close game, if it's within a 14-point game, I think both teams are in.
Eric, your check's in the mail. Appreciate that one, buddy. It's nice that we can roll into this on good feelings because I'm glad we have you here. We get to have you and keep you around here again for this week's installment of our Thighsman around here. We have some absolute beauties that we are going to take a look at here. Let's take a look at our first one right here. Just a photo of our guy Zane West from Kent State. We've already taken a look at this Kent State matchup from the other standpoint, but just look at the tiny 0 on the jersey here showing out. Eric, you know this. I have been big in campaigning for big people to wear this jersey. 6'1", 272, though, seems like the right proportions for me, Emac.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Anytime you have a guy, a beautiful defensive lineman, defensive end, wearing the number 0, that's what it was meant to be. And when the football gods allowed us to have that in college football, this is the athlete that you see on your screen here that was meant to wear it.
Is there any difference between the 0 and an O at this point? Like, do we ever just presume it's actually like when you're reading a text and you can't tell?
Grow up, Jason.
You can totally tell the difference between a 0 and an O on a text message.
You've been told no enough times in your life by everyone to know what an O looks like in that spot, Jason.
You know what? I'm going to go back to my Cheez-It groups. You people keep talking about
Let's
Heismans.
cue up the next one here because this is a dream that Emac and I both shared at one point in time. Carson Green, offensive lineman for Texas A&M here, has the dream come to life. The ball comes loose, and he is ready. Look at the scoop right there, and immediately turns upfield. Emac, the strides on that are beautiful.
Have to be ready. Obviously, this guy's been training his whole life. And look at the legs. He just sputter. Need those knees up a little bit higher. Would have gained a little bit more ground.
Yeah, Jason, that kind of looked like you running with the knee height there.
I'm just saying, he picks up the ball, he makes about 2 steps, he looks over and he's like, somebody tackle me, please. Like, right here. He looks over, he's like,
I can't breathe. Please tackle me.
I don't want to do this.
Honestly, felt like an athlete too, Christine, which is important at times.
I mean, you mentioned his knees being up. Does he have on knee braces? So maybe there's a problem with his knees. He probably can't really get those up that high.
Running with knee braces is no joke.
It's hard.
Guys.
I
It
know.
is so difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Running with knee braces and going to the bathroom in knee braces, tough. And then we have the unknown legend here. This is courtesy of the check down. I don't know who this is, so if you know who this player is, let me know, because look at the big fella get loose here.
Look at that.
Oh, put him at fullback, put him at quarterback, wherever you need. He's getting touchdowns automatic.
You know how he knew he was born for the skill life? Because he did what every great skill player does, runs away from the crowd after he scores. Doesn't stick around to celebrate. He just keeps on going because that's all he knows. He's a big athlete.
Get out of there.
It's also a little Andre the Giant-esque. Like, he's just shoving people to the ground and they're bouncing off the turf as they hit it. Like that. I love all of that.
So again, if you know who this young man is, please let me know. We want to give him credit. I do not have a name on this. Very exciting stuff.
All right, Eric Mac Lain, we are doing one extra thing. This is a little bonus thing. All right, we're doing a game today. It's a little Mad Lib action, okay? You'll find out how it turns out, but I can't tell you anything more than that for now. All I can tell you is you're a part of it, and I need you to answer 2 important questions. First.
Perfect.
All I need you to tell me is the first medical procedure that comes to mind that you would need anesthesia for.
How about a face transplant? How about that? Just totally.
Wow.
Like the movie Face Off. Have you seen that one?
Oh, yeah.
Face Off has come up an inordinate amount of times today. All right.
I'm going to say, really oddly enough, yes, this is our multiple face-off reference.
All right, so one more answer from you. I need your favorite 90s sitcom.
Okay, so I was about 6 years old at the end of the 90s, so I wasn't really watching a lot of 90s TV.
Wow.
But I'll go with Friends. You know, that's a classic.
Okay.
I'll go with Friends.
Okay.
That's a good pick. Also, wow, I didn't realize we're that old out here now.
I am officially old enough to be Eric Mac Lain's dad. That's what's hitting me right now. Like,
wow.
Yeah, I could actually be your father. I don't know how I feel about that.
Size-wise, it probably wouldn't work out.
Oh my goodness, I cannot.
Unbelievable.
Just when I thought this show could never get any more awkward than it is right now, we have managed to accomplish that.
I mean, you managed to accomplish it. You're the one that wants to be Eric's dad, apparently.
I didn't say it. Okay. Good Lord.
That would be a beautiful thing, honestly.
We appreciate you. Thank you, as always, for hanging out. And we'll make sure you get caught up on what happens with the Mad Lib. Thanks for hanging out, my friend.
No doubt. Thank you, guys. See ya.
Bye.
All right, so we've been asking for the Mad Lib contributions, and that comes because this morning we stumbled on this headline on CNN.com, where it says NBC apologizes for Selena Gomez's kidney transplant joke on Saved by the Bell Reboot. Now,
what the hell is that a real
Did you guys actually read the article?
No.
Okay,
of course
so
not.
see, I mean, it did make sense if you actually read it, but yes, this is a really odd.
Well, the goal from all of them, by the way, Saved by the Bell Reboot at least points out, like, there's been 7,352 Saved by the Bell reboots, right? I feel like that's a fairly accurate statement.
That exact number.
Don't Google it.
I should know.
Yeah, I mean, and if anyone doesn't know, this is maybe my favorite story about Mike Golic Jr. and my wife. When she first found out that I was going to be doing a show back in 2016 with Mike, I said, oh my gosh, they're having me do this college football show, me and Mike Golic Jr. And her first response to me is, wow, is that Bob Golic's son?
My Uncle Bob.
Golic Jr.
Yeah. Oh.
But your Uncle Bob was in
Saved by the Bell, the college years.
So.
However, Moody pointed out that in the show, his name was Mike.
Yes.
So that's a little bit confusing because maybe she was hearing you say Mike, even though you were saying Bob.
Oh, but you know what? I never thought about it from that point of view, but you're right. And Jason, it's funny because no matter what, like, my dad was part of the biggest national morning radio show in the known universe for 2 decades. Both him and my Uncle Bob played in the NFL. That is the number one thing that gets brought up when people see my last name.
Well, it made me laugh, and it's been good. So we've decided that in honor of the crazy Mad Lib type headline, we would see what we could come up with. So this is where it all started as we try and figure out famous TV network apologizes for celebrity crush, medical procedure you need anesthesia for, joke on favorite 90s sitcom Reboot. We've been asking all of our guests along the way to get us this answer. And here we are. Lifetime apologies for Bruce Willis's face transplant joke.
Face transplant.
On Friends Reboot.
Okay, so here's the thing, though. I think that because EMAC chose something that's like, well, I guess maybe you can get a face transplant if you like get in an accident and you need a new face. I was going to say, because that procedure is seemingly like a cosmetic procedure rather than like a, oh no, I need this procedure. Does that make it a little less funny?
No, because I think what's really funny is it works. Of course, Bruce Willis would need a face transplant to appear in the Friends reboot.
Well, in honor,
that makes a weird amount of sense. Yeah, to appear younger. And although, in his defense, Heather Dinich did point out when we asked for her celebrity crutch, it would be young Bruce Willis.
Well, either way, I could see him being in a Friends reboot, and why not put it on Lifetime? So I'm in for all of it. In honor of that, in our way more important rankings that we like to do every week, it was my turn. So they asked me to rank the reboots that I'm the most excited for, sequels that are on their way to us in the coming years, in the upcoming lexicon. And here we go. They asked me to rank them. You'll see them there. At number 7, Mission Impossible 7. Number 6, The Matrix 4, because why not? It's coming out.
Hell yeah.
At number 5, Jurassic World Dominion. At number 4, Space Jam: A New Legacy, because the original Space Jam stunk. At number 3, Ghostbusters Afterlife. At number 2, Scream 5, because all 4 Screams have been amazing. And at number 1, because it's the best horror movie franchise of all time, Halloween Kills.
I have no idea what Halloween Kills is.
It's the newest Halloween movie. Michael Myers, like John Carpenter doing it. He's back.
I give them a lot of credit for the name. Instead of just going with another Roman numeral or a letter, they went Halloween Kills, a modern spin on it. Couple of follow-ups here. Matrix 4 needs to be a lot higher.
Yeah,
I mean, the career renaissance, I mean, I guess it's not a renaissance because it never really died, that Keanu Reeves has enjoyed going through the John Wick trilogy so far and a number of other, like, he is as beloved as any, so that's way overdue. No Coming to America reboot or Top Gun reboot. I'm a bit shocked.
Well, look, Coming to America is, I think, maybe the most quotable movie of all time. And it is one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't know how you suddenly convinced me decades later that I'm going to be in for a sequel on this. I'm out.
That's the reason why?
Yes.
I feel like that's the reason that it should be in the top, because you've only seen the old one, and you need to see a new one.
Yeah, but I read that part of the plot was like he comes back because he has this missing daughter or whatever. Doesn't that like fail the entire plot of the first movie where he's madly in love with one girl that he's trying to win over?
No, you're not supposed to do the same exact plot. It's supposed to be like, look at them. It's 10 years later. We've all grown up, and now they have a daughter.
Where did the daughter come from?
Because it's, what do
you mean, where did the daughter come from? Do I need to explain
it to you? He was pure.
I think we all understand where children
Do you remember the royal baths?
And Top Gun, like, I do no interest in Top Gun 2.
Oh, see, you know what? We all have a lot of qualms with Tom Cruise, and understandably, I say we all. I do, because for all the obvious reasons. The sequel looks incredible. Top Gun, the original, is a great movie, and I am excited to see modern technology applied to these fighting airplanes.
Oh, my God. You got to treat the sequel much like the committee's treating Ohio State. There's very limited. You're only having to watch a tiny trailer. A tiny trailer can be good, and the whole movie can be trash.
Okay, so I'm not trying to disappoint anybody here, but I've never seen Top Gun. I'm not really a movie person. Like, I'm not really like a classic.
You've seen Coming to America, though.
Yes, of course.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
You said you're not a movie person, and we just got done doing that, and like that movie's like a family member.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And by the way, Space Jam, the voices were all wrong. Like in the original, if you're my age and you grew up on like Bugs Bunny, they were like all those voices are wrong. Go back and listen to them, and then watch the original Looney Tunes. It'll bother the heck out of you.
No, that's a really bad take.
The voices are wrong.
Christine, this is one of his consistently worst.
Wrong? Is it? No.
The original voice actor was no longer with us, and the new voice actors were not good.
I don't know what to tell you.
Not
Space
good.
Jam is one of the best movies of all time.
No, Space Jam. No.
That's what you watched Space Jam and cared about.
The only reason I want the Space Jam sequel is so that I never have to be forced to watch the original Space Jam again. That's the only reason it made the list.
Okay, well, we're going to change gears right now because today is Giving Tuesday. So before we go, it is a global day of giving, and it's also the first day of ESPN's V Week. We can all be a part of something big today by supporting cancer research, which is needed now more than ever. If you're able, give now at v.org/donate. That is v.org/donate. 100% of what you give goes directly to cancer research.
Obviously, we appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with us. We are here every Tuesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. You can check us out on Twitter, YouTube, the ESPN app. Mike Golic Jr., Christine Williamson. I'm Jason Fitz. Thank you so much for giving us your time, giving us your reactions. We'll be back next week, and I'll try to be more professional.
She's your queen to be.
Is wrong.
A vision of perfection.
Rankings reaction presented by Cheez-It. Maki Marciano.